Hello, I'm Robin Reed, farm economist with K-State Research and Extension. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a spreadsheet I developed to assist a producer in assembling and evaluating an enterprise budget for a beef cow-calf herd that sells their calves after weaning. Defaults in the spreadsheet are given for example, but really the importance of this spreadsheet is to help a producer enter their own herd numbers, prices, and costs and evaluate their own enterprise budget and break even selling prices. So let's get started. First is the basic information about the cow herd. Now, if you have multiple cow herds, such as a spring and fall calving herd, you'll want to do a separate budget or a separate spreadsheet for each. So here we're going to enter the normal herd inventory and then the anticipated calf crop and cull cows for the coming year. Now, the number of cows is a critical input because this is used to determine the cost per head that you will see in the final budget. So this is the number of cows that are normally in the herd every year, and kind of what we call the running herd average. The number of bulls that go with those cows would be put here. And then if you're raising replacement heifers, this would be the ones that you have on inventory that you saved from last year. Now, your anticipated calf crop includes the number of live steers at weaning, the number of live heifers at weaning, their average weights, and then how many of those heifers you plan to retain for breeding purposes, and then how many cows you plan to cull this year, and then their average cull cow weight. And then you want to enter the prices. And there's a really good price forecasting tool here on beefbasis.com, as obviously there's a lot of uncertainty when you're doing a budget what your selling price for those calves might be. So I'd encourage you to use that tool. But here you enter the price per hundredweight of those weaned steer calves, heifer calves, and cull cows. Now let's get started on the next tab, which is the pasture information. So each pasture that you're going to be using can be listed here by name. And then the critical inputs are the rent per acre and the number of acres of that pasture. Now, if some of those acres are owned and you're not paying a cash rental rate on those acres, you still want to put a value there. So you can either value it based on the cash rental rate that you could rent that pasture to someone else for, or your own cost of owning that land. So your property taxes, your upkeep of that land, etc. So putting a value there of your rent per acre and the number of acres. Now, these are optional information here in the green to help you with your herd inventory. You can put the number of cows and bulls and heifers in each pasture to make sure you have them all accounted for. And then if you put in the number of days grazed, the spreadsheet will give you a cost per head and a cost per head per day of that pasture. But again, the critical inputs are here, just the rent per acre and the number of acres. And that gives you the total pasture cost for the entire herd, and then dividing by the number of cows. So in my example, 100 cows, this is your pasture cost per cow, including her share of the bulls and the replacement heifers. Now, the residue and cover crop tab looks exactly the same as the pasture, but just helps you organize this information as well. Again, what's required is the name, the rent per acre, and the acres of each field that you're looking at. So here I have some corn stalks and I have some cover crops. And again, the rent per acre, if you own the ground, what you can do on this, again, is the opportunity cost, or what could you rent it out to somebody else for? Or another good way is to evaluate what is the cost of alternative feedstuffs if you didn't have those cows on the corn stalks or the cover crops. Specifically for cover crops, you could also value that rent per acre in what it cost you to establish it, such as seed, fertilizer, machinery, labor, etc. Now, again, the green information is optional, but if you put the number of cows and the number of days they're going to graze here, you can get a cost per head and a cost per head per day, just to help you evaluate that information. Now, when you get to hay and forage, this is where things get a little tricky, just in how the spreadsheet works, but I think it really helps you put this information together. So you want to list all of your feedstuffs here. and then the price. And again, if you're raising some of these feedstuffs, such as hay, the easiest way is just to price it at the going market rate or what you could sell it for rather than feed it to your cow herd. If you want to price it based on what it took you to raise that feed stuff or that forage, that's fine too, but then you'll have to have a separate budget to come up with what that value would be. If there's other things here you want to add, such as I'm going to add another alfalfa hay. I have two different qualities of hay, so this might be my prime, and I'm going to value that a little higher than my other alfalfa hay in there. And then here I can specify is it pounds or tons. I've $185 a ton. Now this is my ration for my cows, my bulls, and my yearling heifers. If I want to add an ingredient, since I typed it over there, it'll show up in this list. So I'm going to add a little bit of my prime alfalfa here, just a couple pounds a day for those 90 days. And you can see that has actually showed up here now in our summary with a number of pounds we're going to need for our 100 cows that was entered in basic information, and then total cost for the herd. So again, if you have other, you can change these prices. If you have other feedstuffs you want to put in there, go ahead and enter the name there and the price and what units that price is in. And then you can just go ahead and add those to the different things that you are feeding to your cows, your bulls, and your yearling heifers. There is some good information here just on how you estimate the pounds per day that those of forage that those cows are going to consume. So I encourage you to look at that link and check that out as well. But end of the day, we want you to be entering these pounds per day as your feed at an as fed basis as you're giving them to the cows, bulls, and yearling heifers. The table will automatically calculate how many pounds of each you need for those different categories, the total cost, and then the total cost per cow. Feedstuffs does the exact same thing, but in here we're doing all our protein, our mineral, and all our grain supplements. So the spreadsheet works the exact same way. If you want to add a different ingredient here, such, let's add some wet distillers. You can type that in there, put a price on it. And then now if you want to change and add that to here, it will show up in the drop-down list. So by putting a pounds per day and the number of days that you plan to feed that, it will now show up here in the summary. I'm going to go ahead and take that out for now. So again, look at what your cows will be needing, your bulls and your heifers, and put those feed ingredients in, the pounds per day that you plan to feed them, the number of days, and then the spreadsheet will do the rest of the work for you. This little table here is just for if you're entering some things on a bushel basis, such as our corn or oats and our wheat, that tells how many pounds per bushel those feed ingredients are, and then the spreadsheet can calculate the number of pounds. Finally is the non-feed costs. And here it's pretty straightforward. I'll walk you through it quite quickly, but you're gonna put in a cost per head for your veterinarian expenses. The number of head is brought in from the basic information, but you may want to change this. You know, if you're not vaccinating all your calves, you might want to change that to maybe just the heifers you're retaining or something like that. So you can override these values. And then anything other than that, you can put in this miscellaneous total column. Marketing and sale barn fees are on a per head basis based on the number of head you're selling of your calves and your cull cows. But this is open here if you have any other fees associated with marketing, such as commission and yardage and insurance, that might not be captured in that cost per head. So the next thing would be the bull cost or the AI, so your breeding costs for your herd. Bull costs are evaluated based on the purchase price, the amount that you can sell them for at the end of their useful life, and then the amount of the years in between. So here we have a yearly cost per bull of $1,150, and we have 5 bulls in this herd. If you're doing AI, you just do the cost for these different categories and then the number of head that you are AIing to get that cost for the whole herd and the per cow cost, even if not every cow is AI'd. Again, we're getting a whole cost for the herd and dividing by the number of cows in the herd to bring it to an enterprise budget level. So the next category is hired labor. I'll show you here in a minute on the budget, but we're taking the return from the herd to be the owner operator return. So we're not actually valuing their labor in this budget, but you certainly can. Here you just put in the annual salary, or if you want to do hours per year and dollars per hour, it's pretty straightforward. Or if you have an employee on one and then some on the other, it will add those together. The next is depreciation, and this just represents an overhead cost for the loss in value of these assets because of using them for the cow herd and just the aging and wear and tear each year. This is not tax depreciation. So you want to enter each piece of equipment that you're using for the livestock herd or the cow-calf herd, the current market value of that, the outstanding loan balance on it if it's financed, which is going to be used in interest costs here in the next section. And then how much of that asset is used for the cow-calf operation. So here my tractor is only used half the time for the cow-calf operation and the other half the time for the cropping enterprises of this farm. Depreciation percentage per year. Normal standards are about 10% on equipment and 5% on buildings. So that's what I'm using here to do my estimate. So when I add or put all these in here, I'm getting a total cost of about $5,875 per year in depreciation, divided by numbers of cows is about $59 a year. Now the next section is the interest cost for the operation. So we have an operating loan balance, and if there is an operating loan that's both the cow herd and the cropping enterprise, you want to make sure you're estimating how much that loan is just the cattle operation. And then the annual interest rate, the ownership loans. If you purchase some cattle, you might have a loan for what it costs to purchase them. So having that amount there. The machinery and equipment loan is just adding up what was here for outstanding loan balance and taking an annual interest rate. And then there is a spot for a land loan, but in our example, we charged a cash rental rate on our pasture and on our residue and cover crops. So we're not putting a land loan in here. If you didn't charge a per acre rental rate, then you would want to put the interest on your land loan in this section. Finally, if you are purchasing replacement heifers, you would want to change this to yes, and then it will go ahead and use this information in the spreadsheet. So what this does is replacement heifer cost. So what are you actually purchasing those heifers for? So here I'm doing $1,000 per heifer, and I'm buying 15 per year. So that's my actual cost on those. And then we're charging depreciation. So how much are those cows going to lose in value over the 6 years that they are probably going to be in my herd? And these costs are only brought in, again, if you're purchasing replacement heifers. Otherwise, those costs are already accounted for in the cost of raising replacement heifers and the reduced income of not selling all of your heifers. So finally, to get to the budget, everything that we've done up until this point is just feeding information into our budget here and putting it together in an organized fashion for us. Now, there are a few more inputs that are just whole herd values that you have to put here in the budget. Everything else is pulling from previous tabs that we just went through. These overhead costs are things that you typically occur on a yearly basis, but are really hard to estimate. Other than what we recommend, if you don't have good records, look at the last 3 years of your Schedule F tax return, and then try to find an average value for the herd. So an example here, if you farm your utilities on your Schedule F for the last 3 years, estimate maybe 25% of that is used for your cow herd, then put that value here and it'll calculate it back to a per cow basis. So after you have those overhead costs put in there, now you can evaluate your total enterprise budget. So starting at the top here, we have our weaned steer calves. We only have 0.45 wean steer calf per cow because half of them will be heifers, and of those heifers, 15 are retained. So we have income from our steer calves, income from our heifer calves, and then income from our cull cows. If you had additional income items here, there is a spot that you can put that, such as government payments or insurance payments or other revenue that this cow herd might have generated. So this herd had $837 in anticipated income per cow, or $83,700 for the entire herd for this coming year. Feed costs again came from these other tabs. You can see per cow, we're estimating about $514 in feed costs, or $51,000 on the entire herd level. And then we have this value here, break-even calf sale price over feed costs. So if these were your costs, you would need to sell your calves for $96 per hundredweight to cover your feed costs. And that's just on the calves you plan to sell. Now, if we do the non-feed cash costs, add those in there, veterinary, marketing, bulls, hired labor, cash interest, all these other cash costs, now we're up to $690 per cow, or $69,000 for the entire herd. So our break-even cost now became $141 per hundredweight that we need to sell the calves for, that we intend to sell to cover all of our feed and non-feed cash costs. Now our overhead costs are listed here. And again, this operation is raising replacement heifers, so they don't have any cost of buying replacement heifers or cow depreciation. But the rest of their overhead costs are listed here. And in total, it's $854 roughly per cow in total cost per year for this cow herd, or roughly $85,000 for the entire herd. So that brings our break-even sales price to $182 per hundredweight that we need to sell those calves for in order to cover our total cost of running this operation. Our profitability, right now, we have income of almost $150 over our cash cost per cow, but we are losing almost $17 per cow over our total cost. And you can see these also at the herd level. Now, keep in mind, we didn't put operator labor or management labor in here. So this does reflect the return to the operator for their labor as well. With that, that is the overview of how this spreadsheet will assist you in putting together an enterprise budget for your cow-calf operation. This is a very useful tool for you to make risk management decisions or general management decisions about your herd, working with your lender, or a number of different purposes. If you have any questions on this, feel free to contact me at the email here or phone number. Thank you.